So hello, I'm Heidi Hutner, and I am excited to be here with Laura Schindel, George Poval, and Kenny Fine. Kenny is our writer and partially written some of the music and put together this wonderful show, Endangered. And Laura is with Food and Water Watch. And George, you created your own environmental organization. See, so this is really doing it. What we're talking about at the end of the show, Kenny's show, we say, well, what are you going to do about these problems that the show discusses? And George is actually this incredible example of someone who is really taken it and isn't just joined another organization. You created your own in Long Island. So I just want to sort of recap a little bit about what Endangered talks about. So it's a kids show that, well, it's for families, it's for everyone, but it is aimed at children. And it really discusses issues around global warming and climate change and covers all the topics: plastics in the ocean, toxic pollution, insecticides and all kinds of chemicals on food. And it asks the children to really think of, and obviously endangered species. So but it asks the children to see the world through the eyes of the animals and to see what's the impact of what human beings are doing on them and on their habitats. And you start to feel for the animals, and you take on an understanding of them as beings who have feelings and have a place and a home. And it's asking humans to be sympathetic and not just to see animals as objects in the zoo behind a cage that you come to eat popcorn and stare at. So I wanted to ask each of you, and I'm going to go around and ask you why you think this is so important, in particular coming from the heart like that, because I think it's a show about the heart. It's Bamboo, the character Bamboo comes out and she says, she tells her own story, right? I'm hurt and I'm taken from my home and I've lost my family, I've lost everything, and I'm isolated and I've clinging to the little bit of history I have, which is my bamboo. So for me, that's a really important moment. For each of you, what speaks to you kind of in your heart about what this musical is talking about?
Sure. Well, I think the thing that really speaks to me was Levi, right? Levi is kind of like what I did and went out on his own to do his own coverage of an issue that or a way of seeing things that he wasn't seeing done, and decided to do it himself. And that's really kind of what I have been doing with the help of a lot of people. And so I think that that's really important, because that says to the children that you can do this. You can follow what you see needs to be done and do it. And that's really, really strong statement, I think.
So the play really spoke to me specifically because my environmental passion developed from being a kid and going to the Bronx Zoo really regularly and learning about sustainability. But the part of the play that really hit home with me was they were together will build a bridge. Animals had to escape the flooding and get to higher ground, and were able to work together to deal with the flooding and the enormous obstacle. And I think that's really fitting for what we need to do, is work together to be more sustainable and overcome our environmental obstacles.
Well, obviously a lot of the things in the show spoke to me when we were creating them, but I think the thing that has really emerged from watching the show now a number of times is the way that the heart and soul of the animals and of Levi, representing the humans, and then Janie Goodall, the reporter, how it all really lifts up and opens up, and how they all connect with each other and have realizations and have this kind of joining and recognition at the end that we really all are one. And to me, there's also something about Levi having gotten through to Janie, who's the older generation. And at the end, he's able to introduce her and say, this is Janie Goodall, a woman who really cares. and she didn't know that in the beginning. She didn't recognize her own caring heart. So I think what you said about bamboo and the process of one character after another opening their hearts and opening their truth about what the reality is, what it's like to live with recognition of what's happening to the planet and to their habitats and to their homes and everything else. In that process of sharing and truth-telling, it also helped open up the heart of the human and the adult. And so that, to me, is what really kind of stays with me now.
That's a really good point. A lot of people talk about this storytelling, so that if each of us can kind of find our story in this sustainability challenge and get to what that is, what's really meaningful for us, then we're going to find our place in it and the way in which we want to activate. I think it's really important to recognize that the play is calling on us to act. And we know that scientists and sociologists and everyone involved with environmental issues today are talking about how imperative it is for us not to wait. We have something like 15 years left to make radical changes to stave off the worst of climate change. And we're just coming out of a period, and I feel like a broken tape in all these talks, but we've had, during the run of the show, 3 or so not superstorms, but hurricanes, major hurricanes, and radical devastation in all of these Caribbean islands. And it's really tragic. And in Texas, and wildfires burning all over the Northwest, and it's really just, it's horrifying. And it's almost, so another question I have is, is that horror? It can be overwhelming. It can be overwhelming for us as adults. For, all of you, I know we all work on this, and we have our moments of just, it's really hard, and we get tired and sad and exhausted. But for children hearing it for the first time, I'm a professor, and I have, a new class. It's the beginning of the fall semester. And they're all reading Rachel Carson, and then Sandra Steingruber, who's sort of the follow-up to Rachel Carson, and an amazing activist and writer and biologist. And she kind of compares. Rachel Carson's talking about a few chemicals. And, 30 years later or so, we now have 80,000 of these toxic chemicals swirling around us. And, the kids I'm reading what they're writing, and they're overwhelmed. So one of the things that I think is remarkable about this play, Kenny, is that you're taking a very difficult issue. You're not making light of it. You're not. You really dig in. But at the same time, it's very palatable. And you come out uplifted, and you come out, at least I do, wanting to do more. And so if you could speak to this, because I know this is something we all deal with, this thing that I call, and I've given talks on this, eco-grief, which is, it can get very hard, and yet it can be very uplifting. And I just want to add one more thing that I'm thinking of Sandra Steingruber as we talk. She wrote this amazing book called Living Downstream, and another film is coming out about her called Unfractured, which everyone should see. Very big fracking activist in New York State. But when she's spoken at my university, students will ask her, how do you do this? It's so difficult, this work. And she said, not doing it is difficult. The not doing it would make me depressed and upset, but when I'm active, I'm actually not, right? That's when I feel uplifted. So, George, could you speak to this?
Yeah, I guess I can. And I think that I sort of feel the same way as that, where I see an issue, and I know that I have limited time and a limited capacity for things, and in a weird way, I'm driven to do the thing that it seems like that is not getting the attention that it needs, or is not reaching people. And so that's sort of what drives me. What drives me is what would happen a year from now if I didn't do this? That's a thought that enters in my mind, especially with some of the pressing issues that we may have. And so I get some amount of time in my life where I don't want to look back and say, wow, I really wish that I had did that last year. And that's sort of driving me quite far with the things that we're doing and the things that I'm trying to reach out to people and bring them in to work with us on.
Could you just say a little bit about what you're actually doing? Because you have some really great projects you're working on in Long Island.
Sure. So we had a little campaign to get a fee put on plastic bags in the city of Long Beach, which is kind of our home base, and that's not anything new in terms of the world, but it was very new for Long Island. And simultaneously, Suffolk County did the same thing, which we really didn't have anything to do with. So that's one of the campaigns that we had over the last years. We're bringing that to the rest of Nassau County through smaller villages this year. But we're also working on engaging the public and creating interest and a correct vision of what offshore wind will look like coming to New York. It's really a no-brainer, but in some cases people just do not really understand. But the majority of people that I talk to are like, of course, we should have been doing this forever ago, so it's heartening to do that. Something that just came available is community solar projects on Long Island, and we are just at the beginning of that, so that's something that's really exciting, going to extend solar. People who don't have a roof can even have solar panels now somewhere else. And there's some other local clean water issues that we're working on. So yeah, I mean, they're all things that are interesting to me and sort of feel like we can accomplish them if we just do it. And so we're just doing it.
And I just want to add, that's just a little bit of what you've done, but that's okay.
So Laura, could you just speak about the questions I was asking?
Yeah, so even though it can be overwhelming, what keeps me going and fighting are the other people that I have the opportunity to work with. I am constantly impressed by people's fortitude and willingness to go above and beyond to work together. And it'd be disheartening if it didn't work, but it does work. We have, small but steady victories all the time. Here in New York, the biggest obvious one was the ban on fracking, but we've also stopped various pipelines, banned pesticides on school grounds, and so that's all happens because of people's hard work and activism. So I do it because it works, and I'm inspired by all the people that come together to make it work.
And I just want to add, Food and Water Watch has been a really powerful force in New York State. And the stopping of fracking in New York, for anyone who's not from New York, was a tremendous community effort. Many, many groups came together, but Food and Water Watch was a leader in that. And it's just a really strong group, and it's very community-oriented, and I've worked with many folks from different areas, and so I'm very impressed with that. If you just want to, anything more you want to say about Food and Water Watch, for those who live here, who want to get involved in an organization locally, they're a great group to be part of.
Yeah, so Food and Water Watch is actually an international advocacy organization. We're mostly in the United States, but there are offices in Europe and Latin America. But here in New York, we're based in Brooklyn. We have volunteer events several times a week. You can sign up to do phone banking, to call elected officials about an issue. Right now we're working on bills to get to 100% renewable by year 2035, both in New York State and federally. A bill was introduced by Representative Tulsi Gabbard from Hawaii. So you can do petitioning. We have events with really wonderful speakers. There's no shortage of ways to get involved, and we're here in Brooklyn, but we're in Brooklyn and have events in Manhattan as well. And the issues that we're working on really revolve around stopping the build out of fracking infrastructure. So that's pipelines, power plants, compressor stations, which there are plans to build all throughout New York. Here in New York City, there's a proposed plan for a Williams pipeline, which would go off the coast of Staten Island, Coney Island, and the Rockaways. So these issues are right here at home. And then we're also working for those renewable bills, because we can't just get rid of dirty fossil fuels if we don't have a replacement. So we need our legislators to act swiftly and really prioritize getting to 100% renewable as fast as possible. 2035 would be perfect.
So a really good example here is, if you're local, there are going to be smaller local groups, like George's, All Our Energy, and there's lots of smaller groups in every community. If you want to just plug into a Sunday meeting, and you're signing for something, and you get to know Food and Water Watch, and you trust them, that's an easy way to do it. You don't have to take on the big responsibility of figuring it out, starting from scratch, and they're fun. They do lots of, they make it really easy. So that's what there's all different ways of getting involved. There's also the way of getting involved through the arts. So Kenny, would you speak to this point of talking about activating, but also specifically in terms of the arts?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's such a field of noise is part of our culture right now, and so much of that noise is negative, and a lot of it is deliberate, and a lot of it serves the purpose of keeping people confused and keeping them overwhelmed and all that. So my feelings that art and music operates on a different level. It really connects with people on a more spiritual level, like a more fundamental level. It connects with their hearts as opposed to their minds. So you don't have to figure out everything. You can feel what you feel about these issues. And for example, this play was commissioned originally by the Friends of the National Zoo. My friend Tony Small, the composer, and I had an opportunity to write a musical about animals. And I just felt like if we have an opportunity to write it about animals, rather than just like, a nice trip to the zoo, let's write it about endangered animals and really use this opportunity to create something joyous and uplifting, but that really helps educate people, and young people especially. I also think, even though we do think things are dire in a certain sense, and we have 15 years left, you said earlier, but these kids who are here in the audience, they have a long way to go. So anything we can do to help awaken them now, the younger the better, I think they're going to be developing the solutions too. They're going to just have a different level of consciousness. So I think art and music, like yesterday was Global Citizen, and Stevie Wonder was singing, and it just brings people to a different place. It brings people back to something that I think most people feel is a real caring and love for the world. And so many people who are involved in these industries that are polluting the world and destroying the environment, there's a disconnect. There's something that is disconnected in those people from, I think there's a lot of people who consider themselves religious or spiritual, and supposedly they care for God's creation, but everything they're doing is destroying it. So I believe that art and music helps reconnect people. And whether it does or does not solve all those people's problems for the next generation, I think art and music are vital to awaken the spiritual sense of caring for life and all of life, which I believe is inherent in all of us. And as you know, and I'm sure all of you have experienced, Native people talk about that all the time. The Native culture never forgot that, right? It's only Western civilization that has dismissed that and has diseducated people. So to me, art also has that vital role in re-educating and reawakening what has always been true, which is that we're part of the web of life, and that it is inherent in our nature to care for the planet and to keep it clean and to preserve it for the next generation.
So many important things you're saying. So there's a couple things you said which struck me. One, which is it's also the play, which is how we communicate this information. So you show these two sides. You have the traditional media, and CNN it's not terrible. Obviously you're riffing on that. But you're also talking about taking your own message out there. And we now are all very much empowered to do that, and a lot of people clearly are. And I also wanted to speak to your reference to Stevie Wonder, because I was there last night, and he actually got down on his knees, with the help of his son, because obviously he's blind.
Yeah.
And he called on the audience to fight bigotry, to fight sexism, to care for the earth. And he said, we just have this one place, we have to take care of it. It was very, very moving. And all of his children were there. It was really interesting how he wanted everyone to meet his children. And it was just a very heartwarming thing, but he was really constantly speaking to all of these issues. And he does that, obviously, through music, and the play, everyone was very uplifted. And another thing I wanted to respond to was that in the 60s, the very strong environmental movement, activist movement, peace movement, civil rights movement was all based in music. I mean, well, not based entirely, but there was a lot of music. Pete Seeger, obviously, and Joan Baez, and just much music. And it was very moving and uplifting, and it carries us. So, you know, it's really important to bring the arts, and we all have something different to bring to the table, right? So that is really key, and I applaud you for doing that. I also wanted to applaud you for, it's not just, you know, it's sort of a sneaky trick to get the kids in here to see a fun show. Well, guess who's here with them? Their parents, right? You know,
Yeah.
so it's also, hopefully the discussion goes home to the family. What can we as a family do, right?
Yeah, that's a great point. And I want to just echo the thing you said about taking a knee. You know, we're seeing an amazing moment in our culture right now where one person taking a knee, like doing a very simple gesture, and what is it actually doing? It's, you know, bringing that person back, you know, close to the earth.
Yeah.
And look at the power it's having. It's having a profound impact today on the NFL. It's doing something, it's breaking through that noise barrier. And it goes back to also the Buddha, I believe, in the Buddha's moment of enlightenment, when he was surrounded by all these different forces trying to distract him from reaching enlightenment. I'm pretty sure he just reached down and touched the earth.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what helped him reach enlightenment. So,
Well, you know the whole thing they're saying now about the microbes in the soil. If you're depressed, go out and garden. Sometimes I'm a little lazy, I just take my shoes off, but you know, I figured the microbes
dig
are
in the
coming through
dirt.
my feet too, right? So George, you know, what do you, if you were going to sit here and you had a family, and you have families in front of you, and you were going to say to that family, what's the one thing that you as a family can do to help things, to help, you know, make your children's future better? What would you say?
Wow, that's a really tall order. So what I would really suggest is to see what you're interested in. Like we're saying, all these different parts and pieces that come together. I would follow what interests you, and become involved in it and learn about it and make the change, because there's so many moving parts in all of this entire issue. That really, to bring your best personal self to the issue that you feel needs to be addressed is probably the greatest thing that you can do, and probably personally for yourself as well. So if you are an artist, if you're a musician, or if you want to be a politician, or if you think that you're a good teacher, or maybe your skill is that you can row a boat really well. So maybe you can figure out how to do that in a way that raises consciousness for an issue like, rising seas or something like that. So if you put your passion together with your passion for this issue, I think that's the greatest thing that you can do. And then though I really wish I had a great direct answer to what you asked, but I think that on a bigger level, I think that's really what people can do, because there's a lot of answers out there. We need to just start doing some of them.
And do you see families coming, like you're dealing with communities? Is it a single person that comes to your meetings and your actions, or is it an entire family sometimes, or a few people in a family together?
Yeah, we do have some families, and they're like a super powerhouse for like what they do. We had a family when we were fighting against the LNG port that they were trying to put off of Long Beach. We had several families, and so the kids were involved. The kids made the art that went on the postcards that everybody sent to all the elected officials and to other people to raise awareness for this issue. And their parents were like right there. And then when the hearings came, their parents were there speaking about it, and their parents brought friends, and their kids were talking to each other, and it really. So we do have some really good family involvement sometimes, and the same thing with the bag issue. It transcended all ages. which is really one of the greatest appeals for our being involved in it, because it really is a ground issue that people will then say, well, but what next? What else can we do, right? And so that's like, that's a family issue too.
So Laura, are you seeing families getting involved, coming to meetings, coming to events, and do you think that's an important, and what would you say to families if you just talk to these families here and say, what's something they can do as a team?
I think families are critical in tackling environmental issues and any issue. Those conversations have to start at home. And a great way to start that conversation is by, just bringing the whole family out to an event to get everybody on the same page. But what I would say is to how to get your family involved is that tackling climate change is largely an issue of political will. It's not a technological issue. I mean, if we can put a man on the moon, human ingenuity can do anything, but what we need to do is convince our elected leaders to prioritize renewables, to do away with fossil fuels, and really take climate change seriously. And so I would encourage families to pressure their politicians, and that can come from kids too. Drawing pictures of your favorite animal and sending them to your legislator, or calling up the office and having a child speak on the phone to the staffer that answers is moving, and that will be a lot more memorable for that staffer and for that office than your average adult. Going to a rally, whatever it may be, we need to build pressure on our lawmakers to take these issues seriously, and we're the people who can put the pressure on them to make that happen.
I love those ideas. They're really excellent. So Kenny, speaking to the families, I want to ask you something a little bit different. So during World War II, as a country, we came together and we said we're willing to make sacrifices because we have this incredible cause. And we're fighting an enemy, this sort of very tyrannical Nazi regime in Europe, and it was a horrible, horrible time. And people were willing to sacrifice. They gave up a lot, and they did it willingly. And they did it, and sort of, I wasn't alive then, but my impression from what I've heard from relatives and, you see in films and read in books, is that it really was very unifying. That people were unhappy doing those things. They felt they were living for a greater cause than themselves. How can we move people to feel that way now?
Well, that is a big question. I think people do respond naturally to crisis, and so you see, like with these horrible hurricanes, you see people's compassion arise. You see people for a little while, something stirs in them very immediately, and they want to help and they want to reach out. I think for families, one thing they can do is really talk with each other about how much do we care, and do we really care about what's happening to other people in other places. Even if we're okay living here in New York City or wherever it is, how much do we care about these other people who are being devastated all the time by weather, by flooding, by droughts and everything else? And how can we find something in our community that we can connect with, or other families that we connect with, to do something ongoing that we care about? I think that's and something that came to mind a minute or two ago is, it's almost like this idea of a mission statement. People used to talk a lot about, and probably still do, about what is your mission statement of your organization and all that. I think it would be great for families to say, what is our mission statement? What do we care about as a family? And then the last thing I would say is, think about 7 generations ahead, and not just what's happening to us this year, or next year, or the next couple of years. Like, that's something we've lost sight of, is what is it going to be like for our grandchildren? Let's think about our great-grandchildren. What do we want to do now, like George was saying? Like, what do we want to do this year, not in the distant future? what are we going to do now to help create a world that's going to be livable and that's going to be, livable and clean and not a horrible place to live for our own family in the future. So that, I think, is, something they can do. And then sing, of course. Sing together and come see Endangered together.
That's a
And
great.
go see animals together.
Yes.
Yeah,
Go out
connect
to
with
nature together, yeah.
Connect with nature together.
So we're going to close because you've all said great things. And I just want to respond to one thing you said, and I would just say to our audience that you may think your kids know about all these things, but I can tell you as someone teaching college, they come into my classroom and these are intelligent kids, and they don't know very much about the environment at all. So these conversations need to take place starting at home, sitting around the table, and it's not something to be frightened of. If we don't do this, if we don't solve these problems, that's what we have to be frightened of. And kids see a lot worse. I mean, once you turn the TV on for 2 seconds, it's to me, it's sort of ironic. There's someone murdered every, what is it? Statistics, but it's so common and really violent stuff. So this is not, this is not going to overwhelm them as much as we think. They're living in a world that has lots of difficult things in it.
Yeah, absolutely. All the kids, so many kids who've come to see this show. I don't know of one that came out thinking, oh, that was too much.
Right.
It's like they care, they're stimulated, and people here could tell you that, they're talking about it days later.
Absolutely.
About, we have to care about the animals. They have feelings too.
Right.
So animals, so kids can absolutely not only handle it, but they naturally care about it. Yeah.
So do those compassionate things with your family and expose your children to these issues. They're really important. And thank you so much, Kenny. Thank you, Laura, and thank you, George.
And thank you, Heidi, for moderating our Climate Talkback series. It's been really a great series of talks. And thank you all.
I thought you were going to be at the gun back there. I saw your name on Facebook. Right. You sold out. It was cool.
Producing the show. So, but I mean, what am I doing formally? Or do you have it formal place or like yes.
I love much more on your plate. Way more material. Mighty launchers out here, 2 or 3.
Thank you. Yes, thank you very much. Yeah, no, just asking you. Thank you so much. Yeah, so whatever we do the next time, and also we can reach out. We've got a couple of schools.
There's different moments last year. Those have to be scheduled, but so there are these different moments where they're focusing on.
Yeah, small, like 2 or 3 classes.
Yes, so you have everybody,
Short notice.
everyone's attention, or your X, whichever one it is.
So
we have like a.
So I don't know if you go, I don't know if you can get the schedule.
So, but, you know,
If you go to like
I can
the,
get people transactions.
either go to the high level balance or you go to like calendar, UN, activities, and just see like when are the dates, the times, the places, the things that because then I could
Every year.
to, as, you know, as high up as I can get within some of the, I know we can get it in front of the US Congress. Because my associate Harriet Bush-Joyce has been on the board of the US.
I know Harriet.
Right, so she's fun, right, so, right, so Harriet's sort of been the
I know, well, we worked with her
the
on
Oh, yeah, okay. But, she's doing a lot better.
Is she?
She's Mary is getting,
Oh,
I mean, she
wow.
has to write everything down.
Yes.
She's
Oh, that's so good
much
to
more,
hear.
much better oriented, and more able to kind of work with the team through.
I'm really happy to
So, yeah, so I think that that would be. Hi.
Hi. Oh, John.
John, this is I.
Hi,
John's always
Nice to meet you.
So. Which
From an audition, it was forward.
Today, today, you all.
yeah, I also, speaking of that, we could send it to his Terry Tamina,
Well,
his foundation.
So I tried
My roommate is actually just having friends and family come to so
Yeah.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Let me see if I can
Yeah.
He's out there. Did you see the photo flood?
So
I haven't
here,
seen
Oh, you gotta see that.
so here's what Terry.
Right.
That's so small. Drive that. Oh my God, it's big. You live on, well, I didn't drive today. Yeah, I live in Long Island, but I teach in Long Island, but I switch me, I think, to director schools and stuff like that.
That's great.
No, it's been good being happy for them.
Yeah.
They will just do it all. All that, all that. And a lot of them just love it.